Thank you for joining us for our fall meeting. The focus of this year is police oversight and accountability in Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. And I'm happy to be the host in part. My name is Candia Mosley. I'm the current president of the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. Many of you are already longtime members of our league, but of course, if you have not yet joined, we really encourage you to do so. We have several teams, political teams, everything from climate to housing, to diversity, equity, and inclusion that are all looking for residents who want to be engaged in some of these issues, including a new healthcare team. So if you're interested in joining us, we'd love to have you. You can just go to LWVBAE.org and sign up. Cost should not be a barrier to anyone. So if for any reason the dues seem to be too high, just let us know and we can always work out any kind of accommodation. We want our league to be as inclusive as possible. So I'm now going to turn it over to the moderator for this evening's event, and that is Elisa Mills, who is the secretary of our league. And many of you have seen her before because she's moderated other forums for us in the last year or so. Okay, I'll turn it over, Elisa.
Thank you, Candia. So welcome, everyone. Our plan is that we will ask each city to respond to a series of general questions and then later some city-specific questions up until 8:15, and then we'll have a 5-minute break recess before we host our membership meeting at 8:20, when we will also have time for, afterwards, we'll also have time for breakout rooms so league members can chat in an informal setting. Please know that you attendees may enter questions in the chat, a selection of those which will be asked toward the end of the evening's panel if they've not already been addressed. And please keep your cameras and mics off as the panel proceeds so that we can hopefully focus on each speaker as they address the question. And also, we're going to keep the same order of, like, the League of Women Voters, Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville in that order for asking the questions this evening. And we ask that the representatives of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville here this evening, that you take no more than 1 to 2 minutes to deliver concise responses to the questions. And per question, please have only one speaker address that question, though you're free to have your colleague do it if you've got one. Scott is here on his own, so he doesn't have somebody else to bat for him. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started with the questions. And so this is for Berkeley. So this is either for Ismail, Ramsey, or Katherine Lee to begin with, then the others will follow. How has police oversight changed in your city over the last 20 years?
I'm happy to jump in on this one if you want, real quickly. First, I'm Ismail Ramsey. I'm the chairperson of City of Berkeley's Police Accountability Board. I'm here with Katherine Lee, the Director of Police Accountability. Obviously, I'm giving my own opinions here, not official opinions on behalf of the board. So just need to give that disclaimer, and same with Kathy. The biggest change that's happened in the city of Berkeley regarding police oversight is the transition from our Police Review Commission, which was enacted in 1973 by ordinance, to our Police Accountability Board, which was just approved at the last election in November, Measure II, which has replaced the Police Review Commission. It's given greater powers to the Oversight Board. It's also changed the way that members of the board / commission were chosen, but some of the significant powers that have been granted to the Police Accountability Board that were not present previously was the right to subpoena documents from city agencies, including the police department, and I suppose if necessary to subpoena testimony as well. It's also changed the standard of review for reviewing misconduct complaints, and it's also changed the basis of or the method of investigation, where previously we used to do what's called a board of inquiry, which was 3 commissioners who conducted an investigation. It's now been handed over to a newly created director of police accountability, of which Ms. Lee is the interim director, which in the initial stages does the investigation and makes a recommendation to the overall board. There are some other changes we've been made independent of the city manager, which is significant as a board as opposed to the commission, which was not. We've also been given some powers of independence that didn't exist before. So you are now, board members are now appointed by the council as a whole, not by individual council members. And you have a 3-year term and can only be removed by a vote of the overall council. So that's offered a little bit more independent. So I think those are some of the major changes. I don't want to hog up time here, stick to the 1 to 2 minute, but that's the major changes, switching from the Police Review Commission to the Police Accountability Board with additional powers to obtain information in order to investigate.
Thank you. And then from Albany, Mayor Gary or Greg Downs.
Hi, thanks so much for having us. I'm Greg Downs. I'm on the task force that the City Council appointed late last year, early this year, in the aftermath of a prior task force and some other requests from the city. Mayor Gary chairs that task force, as well as chairs City Council as the mayor of Albany. So there has not been until very, very recent, well, still not yet, but will be very, very soon, any kind of formal accountability or oversight in the city of Albany. I think we're behind our neighbors, and in some ways this might reflect, specific differences of Albany, and in some ways it might reflect general slowness among smaller jurisdictions, right? We're about 18 to 20,000 people. And our research, we didn't really turn up at this point any jurisdiction that size in California that had previously implemented this. So in that sense, we were looking at models of places more like 50 to 70,000, of which there's a number that have. And so what has, what was, recommended by the city, by the task force unanimously, went to council, came back, got some rewriting, and then a somewhat different version was passed by council. Earlier this month was the creation of the first permanent body on, we had asked for public safety, they called it policing, but the first first permanent body. So it follows some of the forms of some of the others in terms of having 7 members, 5 by council, 2 by the school board, explicitly empowers the school board to appoint high school students, including non-residents of Albany, but who attend schools in Albany, and establishes, some of the frameworks based on some of the smaller city models of how to build in oversight in terms of briefings, also in terms of utilization rather than permanent staff because of the size of our department, of utilization of a consultant to investigate complaints that come in and to report back to the body on that. So that's where we stand right now. The resolution is passed. There's some negotiation we're waiting on, and then hopefully it'll be impaneled in the next couple of months. Mayor Gary has led the effort publicly and on council. Is there anything that you want to make sure that I neglected? I bet there is.
No, I think you covered it well. Thank you, Greg. Like you said, I just want to piggyback on it. It's, fairly new. We're excited about this. We're excited about getting the community involved and just building that relationship, building trust and transparency. And that's what was needed at this time for us to move this forward. So I'll fall back. I know I don't want to go over our 2 minutes and open it up for someone else.
Okay, thank you. Sorry,
Yes.
Scott Donahue. Yes.
Well, I've been living in Emeryville for more than 40 years now, and I can say we started out as a police state. The entire, everything in the city was run by the police chief. And things have advanced to, we no longer are run by the police chief. We are now a more normalized city. And sometime in the last 20 years, we have established the Public Safety Committee. And that committee has 2 council members, some city staff, and the city manager, the police chief and the fire chief sit on it. And we take questions from anyone from the public at the beginning of every meeting, and we have agenda items. So that's the extent of our current system.
Okay, thank you very much. And now, I guess back to Berkeley, our next question. What major challenges has your city faced in implementing law enforcement reforms on the local level over the past 5 years?
I'll knock this one out quick too. Kathy, I'll let you do the next one. That's the tougher one. So I'm doing this somewhat selfishly. I'd say the major challenges was getting the charter amendment approved. Many of the changes that we wanted to make to police oversight could not be done by ordinance, just by the county. Sorry about that, I hit the wrong button here, but many of the changes could not be done by ordinance. They had to be done by actually amending the city charter. So going through the process to get something on the ballot, and that was approved through the collective bargaining program or collective bargaining requirements, because this is seen as something that affected working conditions of police, was an involved process of meet and confer and then getting it on the ballot and then obviously getting approval from the citizens. Even since the charter amendment has been passed, we now are trying to promulgate rules that comport with the charter amendment. But some of those changes are, again, things that affect working conditions. And so the city attorney and the city manager have determined that some of these things require meet and confer. So some of those changes are allowing complainants to actually question the officer in the process, which was not allowed before. And that is now stuck in the meet and confer process. So I think just challenges working with the union and the police department to accept some of the changes that we think are best for making a more fair process. But they're obviously entitled to have collective bargaining rights. And so it's a slow process, sort of getting rules in place that you can move forward with. So we have a new board, but I'd say, as I said, we've got keys to a shiny new car that they gave to us, and then we found out there's no gas in it. So we're trying to get the rules up and running, which I suspect may take months before we're sort of fully operational. We do have interim rules now, but not permanent rules that require meet and confer. I think my 2 minutes is up.
Thank you. And then Albany.
Thank you so much. I'll jump in here. Basically, I think, again, as Greg Down said, this is fairly new. We just passed this, but I believe some of the challenges that we face in even implementing this is just getting everyone to see that there is a need, right? Identifying the need, understanding why it's so important for us to have this in our city at this time. Once we were able to do that, I think, council, along with myself, was able to come up with a solution and approve this by listening to the voices of our community. I think some other challenges will probably come is just identifying how much we want to implement, identifying the resources that we may or may not have, and in most terms, it's just basically finding out what's working and what's not working, right? And then working collectively with the city and the chief and the community to find solutions that'll be beneficial for everyone. Greg, I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
No, I think you're right. It was a process of helping educate the public. in a variety of ways. It was a process of listening. We had a lot of, responses to city meetings, especially after the killing of George Floyd, of listening, of trying to broadcast out to people for whom it was new or novel to consider, especially for a city our size, of, helping provide support for Mayor Gary to get allies on city council, and to formulate a proposal that seemed well-researched and thorough to them.
Okay, and then Scott Donahue.
Emeryville, a little bit more than 5 years ago, when I first got on the council, had a traumatic event. We had our officers shoot and kill Yvette Henderson across the border in Oakland. And this has been resolved in the courts since then, but we had a real collective issue about what is our use of force policy where this would happen, and what was this incident. And I was new on the council, and I tried to approach this from, well, how, why you're wearing flak jackets? Yes, you might see deadly force from her, but what is your risk? I want to have risk measured, is what I said. Like insurance measures risk. Shouldn't that be a part of this? And then I went to the city attorney. Can we have our own use of force policy? And our city attorney said to me, well, yes, in fact, we can, but we have agreements of mutual force exchange between cities, between Berkeley and Oakland. We supply officers, they supply us officers for incidents. And it's kind of, we need some kind of common agreement on what use of force would be, perhaps. And then the old chief, Ken James, just basically wanted to keep things going the way they were, which was very low police training. He was, not wanting to have our officers trained. So I had arguments with our next chief, Jennifer Tejada, about, come on, let's evaluate risk. Things have to be different. And basically she said that, no, I am not going to have this kind of risk, my officers evaluating risk in the way you're suggesting. I want to just make sure our officers are trained in de-escalation and other things like being, making sure there's no implicit bias and having cultural awareness improved and officer wellness. And she actually made a mindful police kind of facility, which had a room for meditation at the police station. And so, while we argued a lot, I saw that she did make progress in our city using these more normalized means of training our officers more. And, yes, we have to have a budget for that, so this is what's changed. And we have a new chief, Jeff Jennings, and he seems really with it as far as, the changes that have happened. So, Emeryville has made some progress.
Okay, thank you, Scott. On to the next question then. Have there been any changes to police training and selection in the last 2 years since George Floyd's murder? And if so, what changes are you aware of?
So I guess I'll jump in because Izzy's taken all the easy questions. So briefly, Katherine Lee, Interim Director of Police Accountability. I was the head of the staff when we were the Police Review Commission. And so I've been overseeing the transition to the new Police Accountability Board and the new Office of Director of Police Accountability. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for being involved in paying attention to what the PRC was doing and to the Police Accountability Board, because I know that your members attend meetings. And I also know that Sherry Smith, one of your members, was a former police review commissioner. That was before my time, but I understand she was a very good commissioner. So in terms of the question, the Berkeley Police Department selection process has always been, in my view, a fairly stringent one. All of our officers have college degrees. Some of them have advanced degrees. When we hire laterally, they are always, all candidates are asked to sign a waiver and release so that all their records are made available to our department, and so that they can, including their disciplinary records. And so that's, one way of weeding out candidates who might not be deemed a good fit for the Berkeley Police Department. In terms of, and I don't think there's been a lot of change over the past couple of years, just because the process was fairly strong to begin with. In terms of training, there has been, there was a new use of force policy that was enacted fairly shortly after the George Floyd killing. It had been sort of on the back burner for a while, a new use of force policy, and then the George Floyd incident sort of accelerated the need to have a up-to-date modern policy. And the Police Review Commission at the time did a lot of work on that policy to incorporate some ideas of, well, there's already some of the proposals that were made public, the publicly advocated for proposals like the 8 can't wait reforms. About half of those were already in place in the department's use of force policy. And I'd say, I know my time is running out, so let me just focus on one thing in the new use of force policy is the emphasis on the sanctity of life, de-escalation, and using a minimal amount of force, objectively reasonable and necessary, objectively necessary.
Okay, thank you. And then from Emeryville, Scott Donahue.
Well, in the last 2 years, I would say significantly, Jennifer Tejada, our ex-chief, fired an officer who did not meet her standards for being an officer. And I have to say, our new police chief, Jeff Jennings, same thing. And both of these new chiefs that we've had have really worked hard at hiring, and it's really hard to hire. They really have to pay attention. I guess there's a kind of psychological testing that is done for all candidates that includes 11 basic personality type questions that, can evaluate whether someone can treat someone else with humanity and at the same time make quick decisions about behavior that, like, no, this has to be done now. So, it's a difficult thing to hire quality officers. And I think that this really is an issue.
Okay, thank
Of course,
you.
I just wanted to say that, lots of training is a big part of it, making sure that de-escalation tactics are really, trained well, and, training for implicit bias and, cultural awareness of all kinds of different cultures that make up our Bay Area. And, making sure our officers are not doing too much overtime. No, they have to be rested to make good judgments. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm sorry, Albany representatives, Mayor Gary and Greg, to have skipped over you, but please, we would like to hear your answer to the question as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you know, one of the goals of the new permanent commission is to establish clearer records of exactly where we stand and where we're going. On the other hand, we do know about some things that were in, you know, in process prior to the killing of George Floyd, some that were updated in response to protests in Albany and in the aftermath of that. So some of these are, you know, I have a little list here I can walk through. You know, so in terms of updating on the policy on fair and unbiased use of force, some update on duty to intercede, clarifying that there's a duty to intercede regardless of rank or time of service. You know, some similar types of updates to the duty to report excessive force, update to the use of force policy. That is a sort of smaller update, as well as new policies on de-escalation, carroted control holds, you know, being suspended and then removed, and updated policies on the expectation of the activation of portable recordings. And so and I believe that there are some others en route. There were other policies that, you know, were asked about during both our hearings and in public comment on before our task force was established. And so one of the goals of having a regular permanent is that we can catch up with some of the work that some of the other neighboring cities have in terms of making these very apparent and clear to members, or to anyone with an interest in the city. I mean, Mayor, what should I have said?
No, I just want to piggyback on that with the diversity component on that. I think the selection process has increased with more diversity. As you can recall, a couple of months back, I believe it was in March, I had a conversation with our chief and some employees or staff members of the police force. And just to dive in and show that, you know, I believe the chief is making the best selections. He's reaching out and beyond to try to make his department solid. And I think he's done that with the selection that he's made thus far.
Okay, thank you. And then on to our next question. What are the most commonly cited misdemeanors by police in your city of Berkeley to start with?
I'm going to have to say that I don't know, and I apologize. I did not have an opportunity, although I saw the question in advance, I did not have an opportunity to ask about this. I don't know, Izzy, if you know.
Yeah, I don't know the specific answer to misdemeanor. I will say that as part of the council's recent adoption of what they call fair and impartial policing sort of recommendations and policy changes, there's been a directive to remove emphasis on, you know, stops for low-level traffic stops, and that may affect also misdemeanors, so to not focus on low-level offenses. I can share my screen for 2 seconds, and it's disabled. I could have shown you the figures for for felonies, but in terms of misdemeanors, I don't know the specific misdemeanor that's most commonly cited. The most commonly cited felony was larceny.
Okay, thank you. And then Albany.
I don't know the answer, you know.
I would agree. I don't think as well. I think that they are putting in place components on how to retrieve and document the data more effectively. And I think eventually it will be available so we can answer this question for you at a later date.
Okay, thank you. And then Emeryville, Scott?
Well, petty theft is the first one. Second misdemeanor in popularity, if you want to call it that, is DUI. You know, I will say that if you Google Emeryville, you'll see that our city is considered the most dangerous city in the United States. And I just would like it if you could hear me out a little bit about that. If you look at how statistics are done, it's by resident, you know, residential population, but our daytime population typically is about 3 times our nighttime population. So if you were to do, say, a by the hour of humans in Emeryville, our statistics would be dramatically different. And so, you know, I think that's, you could really say it's a statistical anomaly. But a typical crime that would be considered violent is in a retail store, somebody's gathering up stuff at a quick rate. They have an armful. They push the security guard down on the way out to the door to a waiting car that has fake license plates, and they drive away. Well, that's an assault on that security guard. And that's sort of, you know, that's a real Emeryville kind of crime. It's happening a lot. It's a kind of organized crime, really. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, that crime is becoming a little too popular, I think, not just in Emeryville, but anyway, next question. Do you have data to show if there has been a reduction in arrests for crimes where police are allowed discretion over the last 2 years? And if so, is this data publicly available?
I don't think that data exists yet, but I can tell you that as part of the initiative for fair and impartial policing, that there is an effort to, you know, reduce disparities in discretionary stops, and that there will be data. Data might be being collected right now, but I don't believe it's available. But I think that it will become available, and more is being collected as we go on. Izzy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just would say I'm a little, you know, uncertain about the meaning of the question when you say where police are allowed discretion. So arrests for crimes where police are allowed discretion. Not sure exactly what you meant to capture in that.
Yeah, I don't know, because of course, they're the ones empowered. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not. So yeah, I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, excuse me. I think either Christine or perhaps I can speak to that question. I think many of us have had the experience of interacting with police officers, where it's apparent that they are exercising some discretion as to whether or not they're going to press a charge against you. And so what we were curious about, what we were interested in, is if there is any data, and it sounds as though we're not yet at the point of data or having that level of insight. But when police officers are allowed to use their discretion around whether or not they're going to issue a charge, how are they using that discretion? That was the question, just based on everyone's experience of interacting with police officers and knowing of times where they seem to exercise discretion, and then other times, depending on the officer, you might get a charge. That was where that was coming from.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to identify a specific category of crimes that in which police have discretion. Police are granted discretion to, in the investigative process, kind of across almost all crimes. I mean, obviously, someone could say that if someone was murdered and they were arrested, they're not going to exercise that discretion. But in the investigatory stage, for surely, you know, most misdemeanors, I mean, I guess someone could argue not on DUI or domestic violence, but I think that would apply to almost all cases that there's some discretion.
Okay, and Albany.
Hi, thank you. I would agree. We don't have that data, to my knowledge, readily available or even public for people to look at and examine that. At the end of the day, I think as we continue to build our oversight committee, those are some of the things that we will probably need to consider in moving forward on what we give to the public.
Okay, thank you. And then Emeryville.
Well, I can tell you a series of numbers by year to the present for arrests. For 2018, we had 826 arrests. 2019, 713. So we going down. 2020, 444. And 2021 is up. The trend is up slightly, but it is significantly below how it is right now, 2019. So, you know, you can kind of see a pandemic wave in effect.
Okay, thank you. Another question about data. How can residents gain access to data from your city on police stops in a timely manner, disaggregated by race and gender?
So the City of Berkeley Police Department posts arrest data on what's called our open data portal. And I don't remember how often it's updated, but it's quite extensive. And they've been collecting it for some time now, and more recently have been collecting more data to be in compliance with the RIPA, which is the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. And so that does disaggregate the data by race and gender, and probably some other factors as well. I think age is in there as well. So it's there. It's available for downloading and rejigger, you know, for it's a lot of information that's there that could be played with. And I believe that some of that data is being used to monitor the reforms that are being called for under the fair and impartial policing initiatives.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Right now in Albany, the answer is they cannot. The police department is not subject to RIPA until 2023, by my understanding, based on our size. They have agreed to speed up their implementation over, you know, this is one of the things that people had requested over the last year and that they have agreed to. And so the hope is that they are able to start having this dashboard functional at the beginning of 2022, though I think it does depend upon some software, you know, decisions in the software working it out. So our hope is it'll be able to, and our plan is that we will quite soon. And the plan is that the permanent commission would be presenting this data to the public and inputting it into the public record in a way that people can engage with. But right now, no.
Okay, thank you. And Scott.
You know, there is a link that I've tried, which is basically a state of California link. It's basically openjustice.dojca.gov exploration/stop-data. And I was not able to parse out the Emeryville information in time for tonight's meeting to see if it really is disaggregated by race and gender. So I don't have an answer. And I know that we've been intending to have that be the case, and maybe it is, but I was not able to find it.
Okay. Well, thank you regardless. Okay. And yet more on data. How can residents gain access to data from your city on police stops in a timely manner? No, sorry. Same question. Completely different. What mental health services do you provide to folks in crisis who are at risk of arrest?
So I can jump in quickly for Berkeley. I'd say there's two components to this. First, the police department itself has officers who are trained in crisis intervention training, which is special training, obviously, for officers who take a 38-hour CIT course, and they're available to help direct people to services or be involved in a crisis and respond to calls involving mental health emergency. They also work in conjunction with the city's mobile crisis team, which is available essentially daily between 11:30 a.m. and 10 p.m. and are dispatched via police radio. And those are mental health professionals who are dispatched to sort of be working the front line and in connection with the police officers. So they have a variety of mental health resources that they can help direct people to, and on their staff are psychologists, social workers, family therapists, as well as various interns. But that's the basic process. They can provide consultation to hospital emergency personnel, disaster and trauma related mental health services, and also deliver crisis intervention services amongst other things. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you very much. And Albany.
Hi, thank you. Just to my knowledge, I know we utilize services from the county mental health mobile crisis to aid in assistance with our officers, as well as Berkeley mental services as well. So we have a partnership in these areas where they will help us. At this time, we don't have specifically a mental crisis team in Albany with our police force.
Okay, thank you. And Scott for Emeryville.
Yeah, that's true for our city as well. We're relying upon Alameda County Mobile Crisis Team. And our officers have training in mental health crises, how to perceive it and deal with it. But, it's standard post-training, nothing like, I'm sure that the Alameda County Crisis Team is really good compared to our city.
Okay, thank you. And now, so people seem unaware of how they can respond to situations involving police misconduct without risking retribution. How do residents safely lodge complaints if necessary and have them resolved in a timely fashion? And also, how do you educate the public to understand their rights?
You want me to take this on, Lizzie?
Sure. Or
I'll start. I think that educating the public as to the existence in Berkeley of our Police Accountability Board and previously the Police Review Commission has always been a challenge. Well, we've just gotten started, and I personally have been so busy with the transition and just getting set up that I haven't had time to do any outreach. And the same is true for the board itself, which had talked about creating an outreach committee, but that's been put on the back burner because there are other more pressing issues that they're working on, and only so much time. And it was interesting to me how, although the Police Review Commission had been around since 1973, how few people, or how many people did not know of our existence. And so I would love to be able to get started on a publicity campaign for a new system. In terms of retribution, I think some complainants might be afraid, but I have never heard of an example of somebody being retaliated against for bringing a complaint. So, because they could certainly complain about that. That's a complaint that they could bring back to us. If they had filed a complaint and felt there was retribution, they could come back and say, that the officer, pulled me over because he recognized me, and I, from a prior complaint that I filed. So I don't know, Izzy, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I would say, it's a difficult question, and you try to make people aware of the process, and that, there is an independent civilian oversight board, but to the extent that people never come forward because they feel like they have a risk of retribution, whether legitimate or not, it's hard to know. which you can't really identify. You haven't identified those people. So all you can do is, the best I think we can do is try to educate, the public about the support of the department itself for the citizen oversight process, and to know that if there is retribution, that the command staff will take it seriously and will take action. I think that's what you can do. And in terms of letting them know that their case will be heard in a timely fashion, we have certain timelines under the rules that demand that investigations be completed within certain periods.
Okay, thank you. And, Albany.
So this is something that has just been changed. Prior to this, my understanding was that complaints came in, a small department, they were handled by the chief. And so it was an internal process and potentially reviewable, up the hierarchy of who the chief reports to, but there was not any external structure at all. And this was a crucial piece of the lobbying and the calls for the creation of a body. This body, as I said, moved toward a consultant model just based upon, the city's overall staffing levels and the difficulty of sort of coming to a process of having a permanent staff for this. And so we will be making, a contract with a consultant who can conduct their own investigation, bring it back to the commission, which can in turn report it back to the council. So it does at least start the process of providing that alternative pathway for investigation. The question of the fear of retribution isn't explicitly addressed by that. It is addressed by other police department policies. But that is something that we will need to investigate. I also found the record on a prior question you asked about the most common misdemeanor, and I think, like some of our other cities, it is petty theft from vehicle. It was the one that was most common in 2020.
Okay, thank you. And then Scott.
Well, I could tell you that I'm trying to make it a little entertaining for you. 40 years ago, I helped start a tenants union and with a bunch of artists and 3 warehouses in Emeryville. And I got a call from the chairwoman of the California Democratic Party if we were not seen supporting Chief Lacoste candidates in some overt way, door to door, going out there, we could lose our occupancy agreement. Now that's intimidation. Those days are long gone in Emeryville. We have a policy that any police department personnel can accept complaints and by any member of the public on paper and including anonymously accept them. And they can, we have, of course, paper forms in the police department, or they can go onto a website on our police department's website and fill out complaints anonymously or leave their names. So things are much more transparent and much less heavy-handed in the, get back at you style. I don't think we have much of that anymore.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Scott. Okay, one last question before we go to the individual city questions. What is your city's policy on policing in the schools?
You want to take that one, Katherine?
Well, I don't know if there's a policy per se, but we do have one officer who's dedicated as a school resource officer at Berkeley High. And that SRO has been in place for many, many years. There was a push to, post George Floyd, one of the sort of initiatives across the nation was to get police out of the schools. And this happened in Berkeley as well. But in the end, I believe the school district did vote to retain the SRO. I think it was valuable for people to understand exactly what that officer did. He, what currently is a he, really developed relationship with the students, and really plays a role in trying to keep them out of trouble. I mean, the point of the presence of the SRO is not to look for bad actors, but to really try to be supportive and play a preventive role. That's about what I know about our SRO.
And the only thing that I'd have to add is I believe that our SRO is really assigned to Berkeley High School, the high school, as opposed to junior
Right.
high, middle school, which I know was part of the concern in Oakland. So
Thank you. And Albany.
To my knowledge and understanding, I don't believe we do have an officer assigned to the high school at this time. I would hope in the future that would be something more of a mentoring kind of engagement. Again, we're trying to promote trust within the school districts, but at this moment, I cannot clearly answer that question if we do or do not have that at this time.
Okay, and Scott.
We don't have a school resource officer in Emeryville, but we do some traffic enforcement during drop off and pickup and try to make it safer at that time right around the school. So.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll move on then to the individual city questions. And again, the same order. We'll start with Berkeley. We've got two questions. The first is, how does Berkeley plan to protect mental health workers if or when a mental health crisis rapidly transitions into a violent situation?
I think that's a great question. I think the answer is it's still in development. After George Floyd, there were several initiatives that the city council passed, and one of them was to create a specialized care unit. And the goal there is to put more resources into mental health, the mental health needs of the community, and to reduce police officer response to people in mental health crisis. So clearly this is going to be a part of that, but it's still there. A consultant was hired, and there's a whole community engagement process that has been going on. So there will be an answer to this, I'm sure, but I just don't know what it is. I don't think there is one yet, and it's to be determined.
and let me just jump in here too, to the extent that they're asking about protecting the mental health care workers themselves. My understanding has always been that they're dispatched in connection to mobile crisis team, in connection with the police communications units or the dispatch, and are done in coordination with police officers, so that if they're not, officers are not there with them, that they're then able to respond if necessary.
Okay, thank you. And then a next question. Given the updated use of force policy, is Berkeley at risk of not having mutual aid from other law enforcement agencies? This question is about the use of locally banned tools or approaches disallowed in Berkeley.
I would just say, I mean, for Berkeley, this, is an ongoing question. I mean, we'll see how it develops, but this is sort of nothing new to Berkeley that's unique to the use of force policy. Berkeley has prohibited the use of various tools, most notably tasers, that many other police departments use and operate in their training, and don't believe that that's authorized in Berkeley. So that's never, prevented people from getting mutual aid, but, the new use of force policy has a slightly more stringent standard, a standard with relating to minimal use of force and proportionality, but it has now been in place for, let's say 2/3 of a year.
Mhm. Yeah,
And, it seems to be progressing, but so I don't have an absolute answer to you, but like I said, this is a challenge that Berkeley's had to deal with for a long time. Not allowing police dogs, not allowing helicopters, not allowing tasers, not, having a more limited use of force policy on, rubber bullets, on pepper spray. So, this is just sort of one additional thing to lay on top of that. So, if you ask me my personal view, I think they'd work this out just like they've worked out all these past problems over the last 20 years.
I agree with that.
Okay, well, thank you. And now for Albany. What are the next steps for the Albany Policing Commission? What are you trying to accomplish and in what period of time?
All right, thank you so much for this question. First of all, I just want to state the fact that we are at this moment in time right now in Albany is exciting. The previous administration had the town hall, would give a fuel to bringing this task force together. And, our city has now answered that call. And now what's next is just us working together, building again that trust, that relationship within our community, knowing that their voices are being heard. I think the next steps would be just asking the community what they would like to see, how much engagement they would like to have with the police department. And then we tailor something in the way where it's all conducive for everyone in our community that brings forth the unity. Timelines, if I had a wand, I would like it done right now, right? And things will start moving in the proper direction and what we want it to move. But it will take time. We don't want to rush anything because we may miss steps to ensuring that this will actually work in our city. But taking our time, examining what has been brought before us, right? Understanding what are the next steps? How do we build upon what has already been established? And once we've done that, then we've done the hard part. Now it's about execution, right? How do we move this forward? We continue to move forward. We continue to engage, and we don't drop the ball because we think we've got it right. We continue to make changes as we see fit, so we can be well prepared for what could potentially happen, but we don't want to happen in our city.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Gary. Then on to Emeryville. As chair of Emeryville's Public Safety Committee, could you share your plans to meet publicly with citizens to gain their views on local police and thoughts on establishing a police oversight committee?
I could. We are trying to be more publicly friendly with our police right now. We've got the police back on bicycles, which we've noted makes police more available to everyone. They don't have their giant metal shield around them. They're right there. They're a fellow human. So I think that is a good step forward that we're doing. Having a oversight board, we are filling out most of our committees. I will ask around of our citizens whether they would like to have this and see if I can generate some interest. I'll say that.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. Okay, so since that was the end of our prepared regular questions, let me ask this question of all three cities. Are you working on or implementing new initiatives that you are excited about for your city?
I'll jump in quickly. I'm excited. We had a mayor's working group on fair and impartial policing, which started to meet just before the pandemic hit. So in December 2019, and sort of concluded in the middle of the pandemic, almost a year later, a little more than a year, but had a series of 9 recommendations for the police department to enact to help try to to reduce disparities in police stops. So excited about trying to get those in place. They were voted in place by the city council and now trying to oversee the implementation of those. I'm just also excited about having the Police Accountability Board with the expanded powers under the city charter and creating rules that actually can take advantage of those. So it's a lot of work to be done, and it's a slow process dealing with meet and confer and Brown Act, et cetera. But those are important, and we'll get through it eventually. Take the long range view of being long-term greedy. So as long as we're doing the best thing in the long run, I think that's the most important.
Okay, thank you. And I know Mayor Gary, you've mentioned some things, but maybe there's more you could share with us.
As far as policing, I don't have any new initiatives. We're still working on this, making sure that it's effective and efficient. I would just say on other initiatives, working on the Albany project and just building unity and trust in our community. That's so important to me at this time. So I would say, if anything, that's what I'm continuing to work on with city council.
Okay, thank you. And Scott?
Well, I would say that there are new technologies that are challenging to our sense of public space. Like some communities are embracing total surveillance, cameras going on light poles and other places around cities. And we have chosen to not do that. The software that can be used now, artificial intelligence can gather information in all kinds of ways that are, increasing the cat and mouse game. But these companies who are supporting this want our police department and our city to sign on the dotted line to, participate in that. Hey, that's a fake license plate on that car that just drove by. Please, pay our company for data. And we've decided, no, we're not going to be a public surveillance city, but you private property owners, if you have anything that is, disturbing, like fake license plates driving in to your lots, and you call our police, you see something, say something, we'll be right there. So that's sort of our attitude. And, I know some other cities have embraced this, like Piedmont, it's my understanding, they have embraced this kind of overall city surveillance. And, it's just, I don't think our culture wants this and or needs this. But on the other hand, this kind of surveillance can be a part of public safety, but it's just we're not doing it in our public spaces. It's private spaces that do that.
Okay, all right, thank you. How is your use of force policy enforced and monitored in your city?
Is this for me in Emeryville?
Sorry, new question. I was going to start at the beginning with Berkeley again.
Okay.
We have, with the use of force policy, the new use of force policy that was adopted last year, included a new reporting requirement. And it actually, the use of force policy expanded the types of force that have to be reported. And we got a general report from the chief last week about it. And actually, she just sent us some additional supplemental statistics, which I haven't had a chance to look at. But I think looking at those statistics, and actually she did disaggregate them by race. So it will be great to be able to look at those and to keep track of those statistics over time. And then as far as enforcing, obviously excessive force is an allegation of excessive force is something that a civilian can bring to us as a complaint for us to investigate.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. And Albany?
So at present, the revised policies, have trainings and require, and the reporting is to supervisor, which is ultimately the chief in a small department. Again, the goal of the creation of the commission is to create an additional and alternative reporting mechanism in the commission through the consultant working with the council. So that there's, an alternative pathway in. But right now, the requirement in the policy right now is to report to the supervisor.
Okay, thank you. And also then, again, Emeryville.
Well, our reporting requirements have become more stringent and required in the last few years, but we don't have a separate commission that looks at them. Of course, we have much better camera data than we used to have. And so we're in a better position to evaluate than we were 2 years ago.
So you do have a use of force policy, but you are using cameras.
Yes, we have a use of force policy, but how do you you can read the reports, but can you verify them for outside people? Can they verify them? Yes, by looking at camera data is one way to do it. And if we have some expanded in the future group that is going to evaluate how our use of force policy is applied, I think we have a better means to do that than we used to.
I see. I was in my mind getting a little confused thinking of what you were saying before about cameras, but I presume this is the body cameras that
Yes.
many officers are wearing these days. So, okay. Yes. Okay. I know we're not quite at 8:15, but we're almost there at 8:14. So I think at this point, it's a good point for me to thank all of our panelists for joining us this evening, as well as the rest of everyone here. And we're going to take a 5-minute break, an intermission, before the league business meeting begins. And league members, you may stay after and hear a little very short business report before then we'll kind of assign people to breakout rooms. And good evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
And it was a pleasure to hear from what the other cities are doing, and very informative.
Yes, agreed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Go Warriors.
Oh, wow. Okay, so where's